Good morning, everybody. Myself, Sneha TA, second year B.Ed. Today, we will be discussing about models of disability. So, what is this models of disability means? Models of disability are tools for defining impairment and ultimately for providing a basis upon which government and society can devise strategies for meeting the needs of disabled people. That is, we'll be making certain models on how the government has to function further. So before doing something, we always go for a model. Like we do check for a model on how that is done or how that can be implemented, etc., etc. So in that way, for people, for helping the people of disability, we they make a model. Okay, that is the tool for defining their impairment and how the society or the government can devise strategies for meeting their needs. And these models provide an insight into the attitudes, consumption, and the prejudice. Prejudice means like we already have a conception of how this how are disabled people, rather than what is truth. We have a preconceived idea. Prejudice means a preconceived idea about something. So in our mind we think, okay, disabled people are some people who cannot do anything on their own. Like this, certain conceptions, misconceptions, and certain attitude towards them is still there, and this model will give an insight about that. And these models are influenced by two fundamental philosophies. So models are actually influenced by two fundamental philosophies. The first philosophy is that the disabled people are seen as dependent upon society. So this will always result into paternalism, some discrimination. You segregate them to be disabled people. That is, the first sees disabled people as dependent upon society. So this will result in paternalism, segregation, discrimination. Paternalism means that person has to depend upon the father or the like mother's income, or anything like property or whatever it is. They are always dependent upon their parents. And when it comes to segregation, we see disabled people as someone abnormal or someone very different from us. We are segregating them, and there's some discrimination as well. So that is the first perspective, okay, or the first philosophy of the model. And the second is that the second perceives disabled people as customers of what society has to offer. This leads to choice, empowerment, equality of human rights, uh, like what to tell. So second one is that we always consider the disabled people as some people who are always dependent upon us, whereas we'll have to provide for them. Like they are just like how we are depending upon. Suppose, just imagine we are having a ration card. We are dependent upon that. Like the government is offering us the ration things. Similarly, the second philosophy here is like that we people are like the people are the disabled ones, and we are like the ration cards. Like we are always there to provide them. We are offering them something. Like disabled people stand there as the customers, and the ration card is we people. We like the people who are not disabled. In that way, the second philosophy goes. There are various models made on disability. So let's discuss about the different models. The first one is the medical model or the individual model. So what is this medical model or the individual model? Is that this model, in this model, disabled people are defined by their illness or medical condition. So people are always looked upon by their illness or the medical condition. That is, when we see a person, we just name him as he's visually challenged, or he is of the deaf and dumb category. Like we always see them as into that category. This model promotes the view of a disabled person being a dependent and needing to be cured or cared for, and it justifies the way in which disabled people have been systematically excluded from the society. That is, this model is always like how the medical professionals see these people, like they are dependent, some cure has to be given for them, they have to be specially cared, they are not like the normal people, we are always giving them some kind of sympathy or something like that is done for them. Not even sympathy, it is like we are telling that they are dependent upon something and you need to be cured, you need to be cared for. We are actually excluding them from the society. That is, we are not directly doing it. The actual purpose of this model is to include them, but uh, what unfortunately this sounds like what uh, like excluding them. Although it looks like including them, it will actually act as excluding them. So this model is known as the individual model. So there are other names for this model, the like individual model, because it promotes the notion that it is an individual disabled person who must adapt to the way in which society is constructed and organized. It is sometimes referred to as the biological inferiority or functional limitation model. That is, what we do here is, why do we call this as individual model, is that we are actually telling that particular individual person to adapt himself to the society rather than we all together adapting. So we are telling, suppose if a visually challenged person, what we are telling is that learn the braille system, study, use a walking stick, find help, walk. So we are asking that person to adapt rather than we doing something. So that is this functional limitation model or biological inferiority model. So the medical approach is to make people with disabilities normal, which of course implies that people with disabilities in some way abnormal. As I told you earlier, actually the medical approach is to make people with disabilities normal. But unfortunately, it some way or the other, it makes people abnormal. So this is about the medical model. Now moving on to social model of disability. This is another model, the second model that we'll be discussing. In 1983, a disabled academician, Mike Oliver, coined social model of disability. So this in 1983, a disabled person himself, who's an academician, named Mike Oliver, he coined this term, social model of disability. So what is the fundamental aspect of this model? It is about the equality, and it strongly believes in the phrase, nothing about us without us. That is, this model is trying to include the society uh, in taking care of this, not in taking care. It is like it is trying to include disabled people into the society what we live. That is, the social model regards disability to be a result of the way society is organized. It is not just we can't tell that a particular person is handicapped, he is born that way as handicapped, so and so is his impairment. If it goes like that, then it is medical model. Whereas in social model, it is like, why do you view him as a handicapped person? Just view him as something different, a person with some different ability. Don't name him to be a disabled person, but you can just name him to be a differently abled person. That is, here the social model tells us that the society is the wrong one. Like you, the society is the one who's looking at these people in a different manner. According to this model, a disability not only depends on the individual, but whereas it also depends upon the environment, which can be disabling or enabling in various ways. So we have made certain things in such a way that only people with a normal figure can walk or can use. So it is only enabling us to use that, whereas you should be able to design something in such a way that everyone can have access to that. For example, if you make a bus, and if the bus has only normal steps instead of having a ramp of to get into the bus, then it is actually disabling the people who are handicapped to get into the bus. So it is not on the individual, it is also on the environment. We have not made facilities accordingly. So it goes like that. The social model describes that these variations from the normal state are in fact normal, and that any disability is a result of the societal perceptions rather than barriers to participation in life. So as I told you, the social model, it describes that these variations from the normal state, as we say, are in fact normal, and that any disability is a result of societal perception. So actually, when we say that person is physically handicapped, what the society social model says is that he is actually normal. It is we who are terming them to be abnormal or a person of not normal life. Okay, so that is the societal perception rather than barriers to participation in life. So this model advocates equality among both normal and differently abled individuals, and proposes that everyone can fully and completely participate in life if society's attitudes, information, and physical structures. Mm, so what is this telling? This model is advocating equality for both the normal people as well as the differently abled people. As I told you, here they don't try to convey them to be disabled, but they have named it to be differently abled people. And the purpose is that everyone can fully and completely participate in life if the society's attitudes, information, and physical structures are appropriate for both normal and differently abled individuals. So that is called social model of disability. Now moving on to the third model. So what is this third model telling? The human rights model. So from the name itself, you can understand this is to ensure, that is ensure equal rights and opportunities for both the abled and the disabled. Okay, so a human rights approach to disability acknowledges that people with disabilities as right holders, and that social structures and policies restricting or ignoring the rights of people with disability often lead to discrimination and exclusion. So what is this telling us? That this model is acknowledging people with disabilities as the right holders. Right holders means they have rights to have access to education, they have rights to access to the law or anything. They have rights to anything and everything as every other normal human being, or as every other normal abled person. Okay, so the social structures and policies restricting or ignoring the rights of the people with disability will often lead to discrimination and exclusion. As we told, it will always lead into like the medical model there. uh, it is actually leading to discrimination, and exclusion. But human rights model is that everyone has access to everything, everyone has rights to uh, uh, like equality, everyone is equal here. So according to this group, as full citizen with equal rights, people with disabilities are entitled to access to education, equal rights to parenthood, rights to property ownership, access to courts of law, political rights such as the right to vote, equal access to employment. So this is very important when you say equal access to employment. Now we have in the present scenario, if you look around, you can see many disabled people or the differently abled people are not given employment. Many But whereas in the government sectors, you might have seen so many percentage of vacancy is for the disabled people. For the visually challenged, for 90 percentage of visually challenged, for a partially visual, such people we have seen when we write certain government exams and all. You can see this categories given for them as well. That is, this is to include them also. That is based on the human rights model. So as full citizen, every abled or the disabled person has equal rights for what and all, for education, parenthood, property ownership, for going into the court, for political right, the right of vote, and also for the employment. Throughout the process, the following core principles should be applied. So throughout their life process, what all things can be applied is that equality and non-discrimination, as how for every other normal person it is applicable. Disabled people also should be given this equality and should be treated without any discrimination, and they should be included in anything, and they should be empowered. That is, participation and empowerment is important. uh, like we should try to include them in everything, and we should also try to empower them, and there should be a transparency and accountability in that. Like whatever we do for them, or it should be a transparent one, and it also has to be accountable. So these are the three core principle on which this human right model has to work on. This model builds upon the spirit of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, according to which all human beings are born free and equal in rights and dignity. So this is mainly revolving upon this spirit. What spirit? All human beings are born free and they are equal in rights and dignity. So this is all about human rights model. Moving on to the next model, that is the charity model. So the name itself will give you an idea. The literal meaning itself is giving you an idea about what is charity model. That is, people are the differently abled people are looked upon as people uh, who need charity. Like they are looked upon with sympathy rather than empathy. So this model treats people with disability as helpless victims needing care and protection. Yes, when you say helpless victims, this is the right term. If like this is the right definition that can be given. So we are treating people as though they are helpless victims. They want need, they want protection, they want some care, and also that is called charity model. The charity model will always see people with disabilities as victims of their impairment. Disability is seen as a deficit. That is seen as there is something which is not in them. There is a deficit in their ability. So they are seen as some victims. To simply tell, we are just going to pity upon them. That is this model. So in the core of this model, disability was perceived as a disqualification for claiming the right of social resources, which ensured the exclusion of persons with disabilities from social arrangements, public services, and justify their exclusion from mainstream education and employment. That is, through this model, we are actually justifying the exclusion, if they are exclusion from the employment, education, or any other public services or anything. We are just telling them, okay, uh, like they cannot see, they are blind, so they are not good at this. Not like they're good at this, they cannot do this, so let's do that. Let them not do this. Let them not be employed in this because they cannot see, so they'll be of no help to us. We'll have to provide them, we'll have to care for them. So that kind of a model is this charity model. The idea of being recipients of charity lowers self-esteem of people with disabilities. Just imagine, we are always provided by somebody, provided for everything by some wealthy person or the normal person. In this case, it will always try to lower our self-esteem of people. Like everyone has some self-esteem, like I should work, I should stand on my own legs, as we say. So this is actually lowering that self-esteem. In the eyes of pitying donors, as I told you earlier, the word pity would be the right thing. In the eyes of pitying donors, charitable giving carries with it an expectation of gratitude and a set of terms imposed upon the beneficiary. That is exactly said, because when you give something, what we say is don't expect anything in return. But here, when you do charity, people are expecting some kind of gratitude from them. So there are actually imposed, okay, you are receiving something, so give me some, you should show that gratitude towards me lifelong. So this way this model is designed, and this is how this model is. And now moving on to the disablement model. What is disablement model? The disablement model, or you can even call to be this is even called a Saad Nagi model. The other name for this model is Saad Nagi model. What is that? The disablement model was created in the early 1960s by sociologist Saad Nagi as part of efforts to study disability for the United States Social Security Administration. For SSA, one sociologist, Saad Nagi, he studied, and out of his efforts, this was created. So hence this is also called to be the Sadhnagi model. Okay, and this model describes four basic phenomena that Nagy considered fundamental to rehabilitation: active pathology, impairment, functional limitations, and disability. So what are the four fundamental things for rehabilitation? Is that active pathology, impairment, functional limitations, and disability. So when you mean active pathology means it describes an interruption in normal body processes that leads to a deviation from the normal state. These include infection, trauma, processes, or other degenerative conditions. So active pathology describes an interruption between this normal body processes. When you term next is that impairment. So what is the next basic phenomena? That is the impairment means it is the complete loss or damage to or interruption in normal body structures or systems. So such a thing is called as impairment. Interestingly, this model describes how active pathologies commonly result in impairments, but the reverse is not always true. For example, impairment such as a congenital limb absence is not the result of active pathology. This is like where we learned the difference between disability and impairment. Okay, and functional limitations are described as the third phenomena is that functional limitation, and this functional limitations are described as individual performance restrictions. Here, a muscular contraction could cause a functional limitation such as limited range of motion in the upper limbs. This is an example. So the third phenomena will be functional limitation. Disability is the fourth phenomenon, is described as an express physical or mental limitation in the context of a society. So disability is again termed as in the context of the society. Okay, so this disablement model views disability as an interaction between the individual and the society. How the individual and the society is interacting, that is the main thing here. So the Nagy model was influential because it successfully reconfigured the perception of disability away from a focus on physical limitations by defending disability more broadly as the product of the change in the expected interaction between the individual and the environment. Now, this was why. How was this Nagy model influential? Because it successfully reconfigured the perception of disability away from a focus on physical limitations by defending disability more broadly as a product of change in the expected interaction between the individual and the society and the environment. That is, rather than telling that they have certain physical limitations, here the Nagy model is telling us that it is not because of physical limitation, it is because of the change in the expected interaction. So we have certain expectations towards every individual. So when they don't interact in such a way, we tell them that is they are disabled people. So that such a model is called as disablement model. So how many models did we discuss so far? We learned about medical model, social model, human rights model, charity model, disablement model. 5 types of model is what we have discussed so far. As I told you, medical model means we discuss their conditions with medical terms. We are telling that they are dependent on us. They need some care and something. Social model is that we try to include them, that is important for us, but then still there has some like distinction. Still there is some distinction, although the fundamental aspect of social model, it concerns about equality. And moving on to human rights model is that we are trying to tell that there is equal rights for every person, being irrespective of being abled or disabled. Everyone has equal access to everything. Social justice is what is enshrined here. And then coming to charity model, as I told you, charity model means we are seeing people as helpless victims. That is charity model. Disablement model means it is the societal expectations. We are when people are not living according to the societal expectations, are not able to perform according to societal expectations, we tell them they are disabled. So such a kind of model is that disablement model. So these are the five kinds of model that is made on this disabled people. So this is all about models of disability. So now moving on to a question. On based on what I told you, on what I have elaborated so far, which model do you think is the best, or which model do you think can be adopted by the government, or which model do you think will benefit the people of disability, or differently abled? So which one do you think is the best? So do think. Thank you.